Well, thanks so much for joining, Connie. Excited to talk a little bit about your work at Future Currents and your thoughts on what's happening, what should happen in the pro-democracy field. I know you've done a lot of work in the future space too. Would love to start just by hearing a little bit about you, your work at Future Currents, and how you got into this space.
Right on. It's great to be talking with you. Thanks so much. So, well, I'm from Washington, D.C., which, as you know, doesn't actually have a voice in our
Hmm.
government. And so from an early age, was really aware of that. And I like in thinking about pro-democracy work, the first kind of demonstrations that I remember going to were at the South African embassy to protest apartheid. And so I'm totally dating myself right now, but so
All good.
so I feel like the democracy thread has run strong through kind of my history. I really was involved in economic justice and worker justice issues. I got involved in a TA union when I was in graduate school at UCLA and spent a lot of time working on new organizing drives and workplace democracy. Um, for from the time that I left graduate school until I moved into community organizing and then still focused on kind of economic justice issues. And it was actually Emma Greenman, who I worked with at the Center for Popular Democracy, who said to me, without the democracy fights, we're not able to win the policy fights that we're talking about, and that we can win on policy without winning power if we're not attending to democracy. And that was really, really crystallized for me, the importance of democracy, sort of pro-democracy spaces as we kind of had conceived them at that time. Um, I moved to Future Currents, which at the time was Social and Economic Justice Project Leaders Project, from having spent a career doing campaign work, supporting campaigns in communities and workplaces. And what the project really was a space to be able to step out of the immediate of campaigns and look ahead. And so we continue at Future Currents to provide space for movement leaders and organizations to consider conditions that are outside of our control, to hold a longer timeline than we often can on our own, and to practice responding to crisis and opportunity across organizational lines. Um, and so the work of Future Currents in that way has really laid a strong groundwork for preparing for the conditions that we find ourselves in today, and really for helping to anchor past this immediate term when we are needing to be responsive to a lot of attacks on democracy toward the robust and reparative democracy we deserve in our governance, our economy, and our culture.
Great. Appreciate all that. I want to get more into the work that you all are doing at Future Currents and thinking about the long term, but just to dive into um, when so you come from sort of background organizing on economic justice, and you talked about sort of that origin of without democracy fights not being able to sort of win those broader fights. Do you think that that's a relatively new phenomenon in terms of pairing up economic justice with pro-democracy? And I'd love on top of that for you to talk a little bit about what does pro-democracy mean to you in that same lens.
Totally. I think that it is both new and old, pairing sort of economic justice and democracy. I think that the in my career in nonprofits, I feel like they've been really bifurcated. There's sort of like folks who work on the economy and folks who work on
Hmm.
democracy. But when you think about like the 1964 March on Washington was about economic justice, it was also about democracy um, and civil rights. And when you go back even further, um, like abolition was economic democracy. It was all of the things. And so I think that really this is like an approach that is very much repairing an artificial sort of separation that had happened before. I think that in this moment, I really have gotten very clear that for me, democracy is really about a social relationship of mutuality and care, with an understanding that there's going to be conflict. And so we have systems to help us navigate that conflict. Voting is one. And that the underlying notion is we are taking care of each other. We are making decisions about how we will take care of each other, but democracy is about making sure that we are all taken care of together, that we're making decisions together, and that we're able to do big things that we can't do alone together. And so I think that like the pro-democracy movement, if you want to call it that, I mean, I think that in the United States, we haven't really thought about a pro-democracy movement in quite the way that some other places have had to, and that I think we now need to be like much more on purpose and open about. Um, but I would say that like the civil rights movement was a pro-democracy movement. And I think that as we move forward, it really is about how are we making sure that um, we're all part of making decisions together in our shared interest.
This is a little bit of a leading question, but I'm just curious to get more of your sense of it. So on that notion of providing affirmative opportunities in a moment where so much seems to be under threat, can you talk about why you think that's important?
Yeah, I mean, okay, well, one, I think I would like to go to a party. Um, Even though I also understand that I need to go to a protest. So that's one. I think that there's a spirit of joy that is that runs through the histories of so many folks who come and make up who we are together, and that like actually tapping into that um, vibrancy and into our hearts with hope and with a destination is really an invitation to a broad set of people uh, that this is still our country. Um, and so I think that at base, that's why, because we also have a radical vision of who we can be together, and that our radical vision is about being together and is about all of us being able to share our fate and to share our decisions and to um, be joyful together. And I think that we are going to get hammered um, over and over with a hostile imagination of um, a future that is without us, that sees us as fodder for wealthy, powerful, um, overwhelmingly white. Um, Male, like it is going to be exclusive. And what I'm saying is there's an inclusive vision that includes white folks, it includes men, it includes, though, also me, and it includes you, it includes us all. And that there is repair that needs to happen in order for us to get there. There's a road for us to walk, but like to have a picture of the destination together and to have an experience with our neighbors of what that is, provides another level of depth of commitment to
Hmm.
work to get there.
Appreciate that and that notion of an inclusive vision and also in contrast to hostile imagination. Why I'm interested in the question of, I mean, part of what I'm trying to do in this series is understand what the quote unquote pro democracy field has done well and what some of the challenges and weaknesses have been. And so I'm curious to start with some of the challenges and weaknesses. And I guess one way of asking this is, what do you think has gotten in the way of achieving that inclusive vision? And obviously there's the external forces, right? And by external forces, I mean sort of the anti-democratic forces. And so we can talk through that. But I'd love to focus on the field itself. You were doing scenario planning. Why do you think we're where we are now? Where has the field struggled? Where do you think that the field has not done has contributed to where we are now?
I think
Okay.
we struggle because I think that we really do deeply believe in each other. And like, I think that the imaginations that are making possible what we're seeing right now, that I mean, if I'm talking about a radical inclusive vision, I think that we are seeing what a radical imagination of exclusion, of consolidation of power, of destruction, like what that reeks. What is the right present tense
Has
of
wrought
rot?
something like
Has
that? Yeah.
wrought. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
What that has wrought.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think that that imagination is inconceivable in our minds, actually, because I think that we believe in um, our democratic norms and practices, that we had faith in um, the strength of those norms and the institutions behind them, and that, like, I mean, this is like they fired everybody from the LIHEAP program. Like for low
Hmm.
income heat assistance, it's unfathomable that like anybody would want to cause so much harm to people across the board, right? And so I think that that has been a struggle for us in pro-democracy work, has been that we're um, constrained by a world in which um, villainy is bad. Like, and so much of our work has been around improving on the um, institutions and practices of democracy that we have. And I do think that we've been constrained by wanting to improve upon what exists um, necessarily. I think that, like, I believe in institutions. I am, like, in my core, an institutionalist,
Hmm.
and that that is a constraint on our ability to imagine like a path to the democracy that we mean to see, that we mean to realize. And I do think that on the other side, I mean, on the anti-democratic kind of front, has really been about destruction. And it is a it is, I think, beyond what we could have imagined they would do. And um, I actually think that, and not that it is good, but I do think that it means that there is an opportunity in front of us to imagine not rebuilding what existed, but rebuilding what we need for the future.
Hmm.
Um, And I do think that that will be a huge difference. Like, I actually think that there is an anti-energy in what is happening right now. And I think that the constructive energy is on the democracy side. Now, they're building some things, um, but I really do think that there's an opportunity for building and imagining the democracy we want.
How do you how do you balance, I mean, how do you balance the need for defense and reimagining, but put a little bit more starkly when, you know, you're talking about programs getting cut for heat to low income people, and then you're also talking about reimagining institutions. Like, how do you balance that both practically and also just from a morale perspective? Because I feel like there's a lot of conversations now where people are just like, oh, it's one thing after another, and it can seem deflating. So I guess part of it is how do you balance it, and the second part being, um, how do you maintain how do you maintain energy when folks are, because I think part of the strategy is obviously deflating folks. So how do you actually maintain the energy?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's not a way to not fight the fights, the defensive fights that we are facing. And I do think that part of the way that I've thought about the work that Future Currents does has been that we want to resource that vision, that goal of the longer term, in order to feed and resource the immediate fights. And so in the moment, like I feel like devastated by the attacks on trans folks and the disappearances of migrants, and the callousness of the kinds of cuts to real people's access to life supporting programs. Um, and I think that um, like part of the resource of where it is that we mean to be going together, um, is that it does allow us, even through that and through the hard work that folks are doing to fight that, to block it, to slow it down, and to stop it. Um, it gives us the destination. And I think that looking forward reminds us to look back. To me, I feel like my mom's mom's mom was a slave who was able to get her kids out of slavery. And that was an unbelievable imagination to be able to have survived generations to get to that place. That was a leap in terms of who counts as a citizen and how we were able to provide the lives we wanted for ourselves. And I think that that long line helps us to think about what is it that we need to show up and do today, and how is that setting us on a path to get to that place.
Yeah, there's a lot there. So first, following up on that notion of how do you do, or how do we do work irrespective of organizational frames, I think that's critical. And I wonder, that seems hard to do. I wonder how to incentivize it, because I do think that it's easier to say that and then folks fall into the, well, I need to fundraise, I need to do this, and start thinking
Totally.
about their own work versus the overall ecosystem. So I'm curious, how do you think you can incentivize individuals and organizations to do the work irrespective of organizational frames?
Um, yes, I think that it is a big challenge because every other incentive is in the other direction. Um, so I think that one of the things that we do sort of at Future Currents as like utility for organizations is bring people together and like be really explicit about spaces that are decision-making spaces or commitment spaces, which are very few in the spaces that we bring together, and spaces where people can come together across their organizational lines and have real strategic conversations and figure out like where there are possible overlaps and that kind of thing. And sort of how do you create like non-competitive space to figure out where can we work together? Then I think that the other thing that feels like an important practice that we have is really like because we're not an implementer, we're constantly trying to find partners who are implementers who we can partner with on some of the riskier parts of projects. And so I do think that there's um, a piece that is like what I think that comes down to maybe is um, relationship building and sort of like really putting people into space to figure out like where can we see uh work like ours kind of like being amplified and figure that out. We have talked with several kind of state coalitions and sort of sets of state organizations where they kind of pre-negotiate what do we do if one of our organizations is attacked? And I do think that, I mean, we put out a paper from our scenario planning called Getting Ready and Staying Ready. And in that, one of the things that came out of many of our scenario planning exercises was the need for organizations to identify like who can we turn to if we are under attack, both to vouch for us and to hold us, but also if we need to um, think about where do employees go, like how does the work continue? Who are we already rolling with? Who can carry on the thrust of the work that we've been doing? And so I do think that it is going to be important for us to hold both the need to defend our organizations and to fight the effort to get us all to cow to the regime. And I think it's going to be important for us to hold a little bit loosely our organizations and really be committed to how does our work continue and is it the right work to meet this moment? I mean, one thing that you said that I think is right on is um, there is, and this predates this particular condition, kind of habit of we've been doing a thing, we're going to keep doing a thing. And I do think that this is the time to be able to dig into it, like to really think about like what do we need to be doing in order to be able to meet these conditions. And one of the things that feels like pretty fundamental is that for organizing, like so many of our practices depend on democratic processes
Hmm.
to be effective. And like our power analysis is like all grounded in being in a democracy. And so really needing to upgrade those to meet a non-democracy kind of condition feels vitally important for us. And I think probably is true for other fields as well. Yeah. I mean, okay, great. Thank you. I think that like there's a couple of headwinds that I feel like I definitely see. But there's also a metaphor issue I have, which is I know that we always talk about the big tent, and it suggests that we literally all have to be in there together. And I think that as we imagine it, it's like, well, no, I know that I am like in a whole different place. Like, I don't want to be actually in a tent with certain people. I mean, I know that we're not supposed to say this, but like there are people that we don't want to be in the
Hmm.
tent with, and they really don't want to be in the tent with us.
Hmm.
And I've really been thinking about a music festival rather than a tent. It's like we all
Mm.
came to the same event. I
Mm.
maybe like. whatever roots music and somebody else maybe likes the roots. And like we can all be enjoying that and we'll run into each other in the beer line and we'll run into each other in the bathroom line and it'll be fine. We'll navigate that and maybe we'll even be like, "Hey, oh my God, I love that shirt that you got," whatever. But like and I do think that there's something to acknowledging that like we can share a core belief that we can make decisions together and we can get to a place, and I think that this is where the headwinds are, where we believe that we actually um, share an interest in uh, our families thriving, in um, like our kids having care and engagement and prospects in, being able to live comfortably and not just scrape by. And being able to count on each other. And so I think that it's like, I mean, I don't know. That's not actually like how do we actually do it?